Alright, now we come back to our second early civil rights movement video. This one's called Voices for Equality, and there's a lot of people here. Three main characters we're going to focus on and what they did. The first one we meet is Booker T. Washington. Now, Booker T. Washington lived in the South, and he came up with a plan that actually a lot of Southern former plantation owners and landowners, people who are in sharecropping, they loved this because they kind of saw him as not wanting to break the status quo, not wanting to rabble-rouse or ruffle feathers, but just kind of go with it and go with the flow. Now, he gave a speech called the Atlanta Compromise. Now, a compromise with this. Now, the big quote you have there is, it's in front of you there, cast down your bucket amongst the people where you are. And basically he's saying, don't cause a big ruckus or anything like that. Do what you're supposed to do. Now, again, the white landowners loved this because it said, well, all they know how to do is farm, and so they're going to keep doing the farming, and they're not going to want all these rights, and they're not going to cause a problem. So that was good as far as they were concerned. Now, how he went about doing this was something called vocational training. Now, a vocational training means you're going to learn a skill. You're not going to be unskilled, but you're going to learn a skill. In our school here, you have the VOTEC, and it used to be right next door. Now you take the little bus ride, or you drive your car, and you can learn how to do things with carpentry, or do things with car mechanics, or something like that, because people need to know how to do that. I mean, it's a very technical skill, and you've got to learn how to do it. So he wanted people to learn vocational training. Problem is, segregated South, there wasn't a lot of vocational opportunities. So he made one. He made the Tuskegee Institute. He helped to set it up. Now, Tuskegee Institute is in Montgomery, Alabama, and it's basically a vocational training for African Americans. Now, this got a lot of notoriety in World War II, specifically with a group we call the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen. They learned how to fly and were ready for action, and their exploits were basically really well known about them. Now, he said, part of the compromise, right? I'm going to learn a skill, and I'm going to do this. Now, the second part of his Atlanta Compromise was gradualism. He basically said, learn a skill, and gradualism will take place, and you will get equal rights. Now, gradualism, it occurs slowly but steadily. You don't go to Lowe's and buy a tree and expect it to be this 40-foot thing overnight. It doesn't happen. You've got to treat it with care, and you've got to do all these things. He's saying, just get out there and work, and over time, the people who were oppressing you are going to realize, hey, I'm wrong, and I need to give you rights. Again, the Southern whites were really fond of this because it meant they weren't going to cause problems. And a lot of African Americans actually took to this because it makes sense, because they've seen in the past that if they kind of went against the system, lynching could occur or something like that. They get thrown in jail, and they didn't want that. All right? Now, another voice that is contrary to him, and he actually wrote a lot of critiques of Booker T. Washington, is a man named W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois. Du Bois is easier. We're just going to go with Du Bois, all right? Now, Du Bois was an educated man. In fact, he was one of the first African Americans to receive a doctorate from Harvard University. You're like, big deal. No, that is a big deal, okay? So his plan was basically, we need to get education. He wrote a book that was called The Talented Tenth. And he said, basically, only a tenth of African Americans were actually getting power and things like that. And so that wasn't good. He said it needed to be higher. And the way to do that was to increase the number of African Americans, number one, attending high school, graduating high school, going to college, graduating college. This still continues to be a conundrum today, and people have tried many ways to solve this, but that's what Du Bois is going to talk about, okay? We want to get them higher education. We want to get them graduated from high school. We want to get them to college. We want to graduate college. That's the goal. Now, he actually went about this, and he started some movements. The first one was called the Niagara Movement, and this is a telling picture. You can tell it's Niagara Falls, right? Now, why did they call it the Niagara Movement? He hoped that the goals that were explained here at this Niagara Conference like this great Niagara Falls would come roaring down and fall upon American society and make them think they want to change. In short, the only thing that was really accomplished here is they laid groundwork for what they wanted to do. And other than that, it just kind of dissipated, went away. His next group, however, is much more influential, and in fact is still around today, the NAACP. It stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And if you're looking at this, you can see Du Bois's picture there. You can also see Ida B. Wells, and you notice there's also some white people in there. So very important to notice that a lot of the early movements and a lot of the later movements included whites who felt that this was not the way to go. So the NAACP. Now the other thing is in their logo, and it's very telling. They have a scale and they have a book. This is their method of how they're going to achieve equality. They're going to use a book. Now what book could be of importance and do this? The Constitution. So they're going to use the Constitution. They're going to challenge the constitutional laws of specifically Jim Crow and segregation. And where would you see those scales at? You would see them in a court. So they're going to challenge these things to court, and it takes them time. And in a weird twist of irony, it actually happened gradually. It took them, you can see it's founded in 1909, and it wasn't until the 1950s with Brown versus the Board that they really got the big break they wanted. Okay, and they, like I said, they're still around today. They still come up, and in fact, the last slide, I have something to show you that happened recently, and you can kind of make your decision about that. Now, another one that actually, a group that came out was called the National Urban League. They were there to address the grievances of African Americans in urban situations. Namely, they weren't getting jobs and they weren't getting promotions as much as everybody else, and so that's what they're about to do. Now, the National Urban League is much, much more influential in the 1960s in the Civil Rights Movement. They were part of what we call the Big Six, the six groups that kind of really named the scene. Now, I told you I was going to bring this up, so let's talk about it real quick. Last 2 years ago, I guess, Rachel Dolezal, she's right here, she was a leader of a Seattle-based NAACP chapter. She was removed because she was not black. Now she's saying, I'm definitely not white, and what they did is they found out that her parents were white, and she was basically trying to alter her skin to look black so that she could belong to this group. And it really posed the question, were they really upset because it wasn't a black person in charge of NAACP, or were they upset with the fact that she lied? Were they upset? There's a lot of things going here. And so it's something we're going to look at in class and get your opinion on to see how we do, all right? So that was video 2. You got one more.